9 years ago today, I was working as a tree surgeon in my hometown of Limerick here in Ireland. The firm that I was working for got a job in a nice quiet part of the suburbs, as you Americans would say, only instead of these nice wide streets like you have over in the States, over here we have these little narrow winding ones that were laid out before cars were even a thing. They're very quaint and charming, don't get me wrong. I'm grateful to have been born in such a beautiful place. But they're a right bugger to work in, and the street in question was so small that we didn't even have space to park a wood chipper. That meant that I had to cut all the smaller branches inside of our trailer so that we had enough space to transport them all away. A lot of people would since ask me why I do something with an increased risk for just the sake of leaving a neat and tidy job site, but the simple truth is, if you leave a load of wood and sawdust around, you'll simply not be paid for your work. On top of that, using the chainsaw inside of a trailer, which was just the smallish kind that you see on the back of four-wheel drives, was something that we'd done many times before without incident. All you have to do is keep the blades away from the metal sides of the trailer and you're grand. And I was grand, right up until I wasn't. Honestly, I have no idea how it happened. All I remembered is a sudden jolt through my brains, then what felt like a punch to my throat. There was a moment of confusion because the impact wasn't that painful, but I knew that I'd hurt myself somehow because I could feel the top of my t-shirt getting all warm and wet. I stepped down from the trailer, and that's when I saw just how much I was bleeding. Then, when I tried to take a breath, it felt labored. My boss was standing just a few feet away, but then before I could reach out to grab him, someone else shouted something about an accident, and he turned around to see me. The look on his face said it all. He turned white as a sheet, then lunged for my neck, clamping both hands over what I realized was a wound. And that's when I knew how bad it was. When everyone started screaming and shouting, seeing my own blood just didn't do it for some reason. But hearing everyone's terror drove the point home. I was literally dying. One of the lads that I was working with at the time, a Polish guy that he suddenly appears with the first aid kit that we kept in the van, and then he pulled out some kind of gauze bandage and started wrapping it around my neck. He was trying his best to stop the bleeding, to the point that my boss was scared that he was going to throttle me, and I was just lying there, letting him do his thing with this really weird sense of calm having come over me. I appreciated everything that they were doing for me, trying to save my life and all that, but come on. I'd cut my bloody throat open and I was convinced that I was a goner. I remember listening to one of the other lads calling 999, telling the person on the other end how badly we needed the ambulance, and thinking how sad it was that those words would be the last that I'd ever hear. Not sad like boo-hoo. I mean, sad like what a bollocks end to my life, some crappy accident at work. Any second now, I thought. I'll close my eyes. It'll be just like going to sleep. And when I open them again, I'll be with my Nana and Granddad. It's so spooky thinking back on it now because it's the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I don't know where all the calmness came from. I had no idea that I had it in me. But then the minutes went by and I'm thinking, all right, I don't feel so terrible. I can still breathe and all that. Maybe I'll survive for a bit. A few minutes later, I started hearing sirens and the lads are going, "This is you now. Hang on, big man, you'll be all right," and all that kind of stuff. The paramedics got me on a stretcher, stuck something in my arm, then loaded me onto the back of the ambulance. One of the lads were allowed in with me, and he kept all the words of encouragement as he went. I just remember looking at my legs the whole time, then having to squint all these lights that were in my face. And the last thing I remember before everything went black was a doctor telling me that they were about to put me to sleep so they could have a look at my neck. His last words to me were, "Everything's going to be fine." And I distinctly remember thinking, "You liar." Turns out, he wasn't lying, and I woke up God knows how long after with my neck all wrapped up in gauze. I thought I'd be in the hospital for a month getting well again, but I was only in there for a week. I can promise you, though, it felt a lot longer than that. The worst part of every day was when I had to get my tracheostomy dressing changed. It wasn't all that painful, but it was psychologically horrible because you can feel where there's a bloody great hole in your neck. And apart from that, though, I'm honestly quite surprised at myself for how I handled the whole thing. Like I said before, it's honestly really frightening to think back to how calm I was about losing my life. It felt like more of an annoyance or inconvenience than anything tragic or scary, and the recovery was 100 times worse than the accident itself. The doctors tested me for PTSD and all that kind of stuff in the months that followed, but I honestly think all the lads that I was working with came off worse than me in that department. A good example would be when I went back to work. I said I didn't mind getting back on the saws if it wasn't cooped up in the trailer, but my boss was having none of it. That was 3 weeks later. Just 3 weeks, and that's the craziest part to me. You think that being close to dying would mean more of a recovery time, and I suppose I would have been entitled to more time off, but the idea of sitting around on my butt doing nothing was fit to drive me mad. I just wanted to get back to work and forget about the whole thing, and I know that sounds insane considering I had the accident there, but I wanted to sort of reclaim my work from the trauma, so to speak. I wanted to nip that fear in the bud, so that the sight of a chainsaw wouldn't come to bloody haunt me, or something. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.